Hello there, and welcome to episode 38 of CUZZO-OP. I am your host for this episode, Willie, and as usual, we've got
IV, Isaiah, what's good? Episode 38, baby.
So, this week, we've got a special guest joining us here at CUZZO-OP. Hopefully, you listeners listened to Shorts 5 that released earlier this week, but if you didn't, here's your chance to get to know him. We've got my father, Killa V.
Salute to everyone out there.
So, this week, we've got our second 101 episode, and this week's theme is getting into horror. Now, obviously, we're doing this because Halloween is next week, and we were feeling a little bit festive here. We were like, how could we do some Halloween-type episode? Oh, let's talk about horror, because there's so many different genres and subgenres in the damn title of horror itself, and we were like, that's a cool idea.
Yeah, jack-o'-lanterns is lit, you know what I mean? And I'm not even a big Halloween guy, but you know it's lit, you know what I mean?
So, like Isaiah just said, he ain't a big Halloween guy, right? And I'm a big, spooky season lover. I'm like, okay, we in there, the movies, the vibe just feels great to me, but I wouldn't be like that without Killa V. And so when the time came to really plan this episode out, it was like, he gotta be here. There's no way we can move forward with this episode without securing him as the special guest. And that's how we got here. And the reason why it just makes perfect sense for him to be here is because this entire October season is his favorite time of the year because of everything. So can you explain a little bit about that, Killa V? What makes this season so just it for you?
Pumpkin.
I believe it's because I'm a Virgo born in the fall, so I just got into pumpkins at a young age. Then I learned about pumpkin beers, so I started, doing a pumpkin beer festival. This was actually our 10th year that just ended. And just that season of cold weather, beer warming you up, the fire pit, the black cat, the witch in the sky. It's just all, it's just an exciting time to be scared, but also feel excited about that time of year. So I've always enjoyed it.
That's very well said, actually. That's very well said, especially because you got the contrast. You got the warmth and a little cold, a little bone chilling. You feel me? That's good stuff. I like that.
This is definitely my second favorite time of year. Depending on the year, right now, I'm feeling this a lot. I don't know if my end of November, December season, I don't know if it's going to beat Halloween this year. But, we talking about horror movies today. We're going to be going into the different concepts of horror. And the reason why it's so important that we do this is because someone out there probably read our title right now and saw something completely different in their mind about what we would be speaking about than someone else. Someone might have read our title and seen it as they're talking about slashers, and that's it. Some people might have seen it and think, they're talking about these Jordan Peele thrillers. Someone might have seen it and said, they're doing the jump scare movies like The Conjuring. That's why we need this episode, because of how large this entire genre is. And so before we move into any of that, I just want to know for both of you, what does horror mean? And I want to hear from IV first.
I think it's good that you're letting me begin because I'm probably going to go the less traditional route. You mentioned Jordan Peele. I mean, here's one thing that you got to know about me. I'm not big on horror films like Paranormal Activity, senseless killings and ghosts. I got the classics in my lineup, like, The Ring and stuff like that, things that are iconic to the genre. But for me, I'm really into what's spooky and what's scary to me is the stuff that feels real. So I do like Jordan Peele's stuff, everything he's released, from Nope, Us, Get Out. Each of them, I have a special place in my heart for them. But I also like more thriller than horror. So I think horror for me just means, you got to put supernatural stuff underneath there, especially for the purposes of scaring you as the viewer. But I think horror is supposed to make you just kind of chill on the inside, just kind of feel unease. Something that gives you unease is what I would say my definition of horror would be. But who knows? The cinema heads might kill me for that definition. What about you guys?
When I think of horror, I think of something that could be real, right? So it's that's the fear that when I feel fear when I'm watching movies, that damn, that could possibly happen around the block, right? Michael Myers could possibly be in Nyack, walking those streets, and That is what puts the fear, like the excitement, like, oh, that could possibly happen. The other stuff with, like you just said, like the Exorcist, right? And all those other movies that are like spiritual or supernatural.
Right.
I've never seen that, right? So it's hard for me to relate to those type of movies. Yes, part of it's scary, but I'm more scared of the movies that could possibly happen. Those are the ones like, shit, I'm scared because that shit could happen right around the corner. Those are the things that scare. That's horror to me.
Yeah, that's valid.
I'm watching a show on Netflix right now. I don't know the name of it, but the kid from Stranger Things, it's a prank show where he's doing fear into people and to see how they react. And then at the end of it, which some of the episodes are like, I'm surprised the person didn't try to fight, right? But they're so frightened that they're sitting there in shock because they can't believe it's really happening. Then he comes out and says, this is a prank. You know, if you watch those type of shows, again, it's really happening in front of somebody's eyes that they can't believe it's happening, right? There's that fear. Oh my God, this can't be real. And then he comes out and says it's a prank. So I highly recommend it because I've been watching it with my kids during the season. We try to watch an episode every day just to get that little Halloween, feeling during the month of October.
Yeah, I believe that the show is called Prank Encounters, but for me, I recognize all of it. It's all horror, it's all a part of the genre, but I personally really, really enjoy the slasher and psychological thriller genre of horror. That's my favorite. Those are the ones that I really love to focus in on. But there are some golden nuggets in the supernatural realm and all that other paranormal stuff. But when I'm playing video games, then I'm down for it all. It doesn't matter. I'm locked in. But for the final prelude question, I gotta know, and the listeners gotta know. Do you guys like the feeling of fear? Do you like being scared?
I do. I think I don't like to go to a movie for just the purpose of feeling scared, though. I'll just be real with you. If the story isn't interesting in some way and I'm scared along the journey, then it's not something I want to partake in. And I think that's part of why I don't watch the Paranormal Activity stuff. Like, it's also a lot of that's poorly written. A lot of that is poorly just put together. It's just jump scares for jump scares' sake. I like when there's a little artistry to it. You feel me?
I'm going to be honest. I go to bed listening to podcasts. There's a show called Radio Rental where people are telling their stories, paranormal, being kidnapped, all this fear. And another one is called Swords and Scale Nightmares. So usually this is just the type of stuff I listen to to put me to sleep. So I love it all. It gets me nervous, it gets me tired, but it's like a cuddling feeling for me when I hear these stories before bed. It's hard to explain.
I mean, everybody finds that coziness and comfortability in something, right? I mean, whenever we're going down to North Carolina or driving back home from a long drive, we be listening to that Mr. Ballin real life crime stories. Like, that's just what we be finding that weird sense of comfortability and relaxation in. But at the end of the day, right? You like to be scared. That's what I'm hearing.
Definitely.
For me, I think it's hard because the movies don't really do it for me the way that like video games do when I got my headset on and everything is screaming very loud in my ear or someone jumps at me and I hear the dun-dun. But in movies and television shows, it's the sound department and soundtracks that really get to me. That's what builds it all up for me. So I think that's what I feel when I'm watching movies, the scare of the anticipation.
Yeah, the soundtrack is very important. You anticipating because the music is making you anticipate, right? So you hear that dun, 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 and it makes you, something's about to pop. Where's he coming from? Which windows he jumping, right? So that really is very important for the horror genre.
And half those scenes wouldn't even be scary without the music.
Exactly. Man. Exactly.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely important that these creators know how to use sound and their soundtracks to build the suspense of their movies. They're pivotal to these horror franchises and films. But time to dive into our first subgenre of horror. Probably the more popular one in terms of classic horror, although it can get very messy when it comes to deciding what is and isn't in this subgenre. And we're talking about slashers. It's my favorite genre, I believe. And like I said, it gets hard to dictate what is and isn't a slasher when you consider the fact that the term was created after so many of these films were made. So let's get into it.
I just want to say, because Halloween is one of my favorite movies of all time, is that I didn't consider Halloween 1 being the slasher, right? Because he wasn't really going around like Jason and all these other movies going around in a lot of murder, right? It's in the recent Halloween where he became the slasher, where he's really just going at anybody that came in his way. He's cutting them up, right? Halloween 1, he was thinking, it was like he had a plan. He knew what he wanted to do. He knew how he wanted to stage the bodies. It was just a different beast to me, that Halloween 1. So I like the slasher movie, but when it's overly done, like the last Halloween to me, where he was just killing everybody he was walking through, it was corny to me.
I mean, I could definitely understand where you're coming from, because there's so much of the slasher genre that is now so integral to like Friday the 13th that those are the movies that people will typically think of when they hear slasher, because the idea of a slasher is essentially like a masked man going around killing teenagers with knives and blades, and Friday the 13th films, for better or for worse, they're slasher movies. Formulaic slasher movies. In my opinion, they're really boring slasher movies also. I am not a fan of the Friday the 13th. I've seen all of them, and I can't say that I liked any of them. But the original slasher, or not even that, the first labeled slasher is Halloween, because of the way he goes around killing people in that meticulous, almost strategic manner. It does get that award for being the first label, and I understand why, and I do accept it as a slasher. The most important one, in fact, because of the fact that Friday wouldn't exist without it. Because the studio for Friday got the call saying copy Halloween and make it bigger. So that's why I definitely think I have a certain love for the genre, because I love the Halloween films also. And I do agree with you, though, that sometimes they be doing too much, especially with the Halloween movies, where they have Michael be doing a lot of sprint racing and stuff like that. Like, no thank you, Rob Zombie, garbage movies.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I know how special the original Halloween batch of movies were. I understand that. But I don't know. I wasn't as attached to them as I know you guys were. And so when the 2018 quote unquote reboot or continuation of the story, whatever phrasing you want to use, where Jamie Lee Curtis comes back, I actually enjoy that movie very much on a base level of setting up what you guys are saying. And this is going to be a little wild. So Killa V, you might kill me for saying this. Hear me. But I think, like, because I wasn't as attached to the original Halloween, this is my Halloween.
I mean, listen, bro. I mean, respect the original, but like the new. Halloween 2018 is my favorite Halloween movie, because I think it does enough to respect the original movie while also amplifying it to be taken a little bit more serious, because it's a modern movie. Not everybody's going to respect the classic. So I think the new one did a great job at bringing new audiences in, understanding the story, but you can't have it without the OG. So you got to kind of respect it. You know what I'm saying? But it's my favorite Halloween still, bro. And for all that crazy extraness, I think that 2018 does good, where Halloween Kills starts to bring it into like the too much category.
Right. So what I'm saying is the same way that Halloween 2 was different than Halloween the original, and it lost some of its pizzazz, it happened again when we got Halloween Kills for my Halloween. So I feel similarly to how you guys feel about the first set of movies and how it's gotten away from what matters. But this movie, for me, it grounded it once again in a way that was like, okay, I actually would claim this as one of my top 10 horror films. Like, I actually would keep this as a cult classic type level. So I don't know. I think I like slasher movies because you know what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen. What movie have you ever wanted to see where you know what's going to happen? You don't. But there's something about knowing this guy's just going to kill a bunch of people that I'm like, let's go. I got to see, because that's scary. That's actually very scary to me.
And to me, that's not the anticipation of not seeing the face early, not seeing what the mask looks like. Not those pieces to me are more frightening, right? Than seeing the mask early and knowing what it looks like and knowing he's coming versus him just popping, she's at school, he's just there, right? Those type of scenes, she looks out the back, he's out in the backyard just standing there. Those are the things that, right? Versus, he's coming. Like you just said, I just like that better than knowing he's coming.
I think they know they can't make a story that's as great and focused on him like they did originally, so they've switched it up. I just feel like these last 3, Halloween Kills, Halloween Ends, and Halloween 2018, they focus on the concept of fear more than Mike Myers, and I think that's interesting. The take is different.
Yeah, and the Jason movie definitely, when I first saw that, I was still young, so whenever I went camping, right, because it's built in that campsite, every time I went somewhere where there was camping, that fear of, Jason might be right there, right? You play with it, you laugh, but back in the mind, you're like, he's right there. He's in the lake. He's about to get us. And I was the guy who used to try to scare people, right? While being scared, right? That was the fun part. I'm scared as hell, so I'm going to take that out on everybody else.
Yeah, you definitely like to scare people, but I think you both are making really great points as to why the slasher genre can be for somebody, because there's movies out there that give you exactly what you want and you know what you're getting into. That's what the Friday the 13th were most of the time. And I think that's why I didn't really much care for them. It was just too much of the same thing over and over again with characters that I just did not find interesting, especially Jason. But then on a flip side, there are those movies where you kind of know what you're getting, but there's also a new twist to it, which is what I feel the 2018 Halloween was. It was more of the same, yet some twists and tinkering with it that made it a newer, fresher experience at the same time, which made it kind of glorious. And then there's the crazy out there ones, we're going to do something new kind of things also, which could be for people. So this is why the horror genre gets kind of crazy, because there's the horror genre, but then in the horror genre, there's the subgenre of slasher. But then in the slasher genre, there are subgenres within itself. And that's what's great, because there's always going to be something for someone. Something new that I've been getting into a little bit were the Scream movies. I had seen the first Scream a long time ago and then never watched any of them. And so earlier this month, I sat down and I watched all of the Scream movies for the first time. Number one, there wasn't a bad Scream movie in my opinion. There are weaker ones, but none of them were bad. They were all entertaining. They were all fresh slasher movies that were relatable, because that's what we're saying here. We like the relatability. There was something relatable about people going around slashing teenagers, because stuff like that even happens to this day. And it's amazing to see how the Scream movies have stood the test of time, from the 90s to the late 2010s, all the way to where we are now in the 2020s. It's just glorious. And there was some fresh stuff. They're funny. They are a commentary on the slasher genre itself, which is so interesting because they're making comments about the Halloween movies and they got Halloween playing on the background. And they're like, I ain't gonna die in no slasher film, but they're in a slasher film themselves, following the same routines that they tell each other not to follow based on the movies that we are sitting here and talking about right now. It is so fun, in my opinion. Like, Halloween is still my favorite, but as a franchise, this is a force to be reckoned with, and they're still going.
The one thing I'll say about the Scream movies that I love is it's just not a slasher movie, but there's also the mystery. Who's the killer, right? So it keeps you engaged to say, damn, is it this guy? Is it this guy, right? You're guessing throughout the movie to figure out. So it's that mystery of, we don't know who the killer is. So it keeps us more engaged than if we knew, oh, that's the killer right there, right? Or Freddy Krueger. We know who Freddy Krueger is. We know it's Jason. We know these type of movies keep you, yes, there's a murder, but who is it? It's a mystery.
Listen, IV and I, we doing a mystery episode of CUZZO-OP way in the future, no time soon, but we've already written down Killa V as a guest for that one, because if he ain't watching a horror movie, he probably watching a mystery movie or a Batman movie, but most likely a mystery movie like Clue, Knives Out, Glass Onion. So whenever we do that, you best believe Killa V will be back.
Just to joke, we were watching a slasher movie last night, me and the kids, a brand new one that just came out. And I guessed who the killer was. Like, that was my goal, right? It was like, who is it? There's 10 people. And I was able to identify from the start because that's what I love. But it was interesting that, they're making those type of movies, which I love. It keeps me engaged. It keeps the kids engaged. We're talking about who you think did it. That's fun.
What's the movie called?
Totally Killer. Right now it's on Prime, I think.
All right, Totally Killer. I'm gonna have to check that out because I'm all game for a new slasher movie. I love when they add to this genre. But yeah, for the Scream movies, there's also this cool concept of there being like, sometimes there's gonna be one killer, sometimes they gonna sneak the two, sometimes they gonna sneak the three, sometimes they gonna sneak the 17. You know what I'm saying? Like, they play with this concept because there is no Michael Myers or Jason. They can get away with doing stuff like that. And I know that's kind of crazy to be speaking about, just in case for people who haven't seen it at all. But it's still a cool concept of like, if you don't want someone who's just a mainstay, run-of-the-mill, boring killer, then the Scream movies might be the way for you.
My last thing about the slasher is just about the movie last night it was a Back to the Future / slasher film. You gotta catch it. They kept referencing Back to the Future. It was crazy. But the movie was that. It was them mentioning Back to the Future and all the 1980 type stuff, which was right up my alley. So I loved I completely loved the movie, to be honest.
So let me ask real quick before we move on. When you think of concepts like Happy Death Day, movies like that, where now the killer is no longer a mysterious figure that's set to scare you, but there is some level. Actually, no. Happy Death Day would be a slasher film. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it. It would, all of them, because the guy who's stabbing her is masked, and she doesn't know who it is, and she keeps dying from him out there and then waking up again at the beginning of that day, over and over again. That was a unique take, bro.
Yeah, essentially, Happy Death Day is this girl wakes up, and at some point in the day, she gets killed by someone in a baby mask, and then she wakes up the next day, restarting her day. It's like Groundhog's Day, but a slasher, and it's kind of fire. I also enjoyed the first movie.
Interesting. I gotta look that up for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, to end off the slasher talk, we've spoken about a few movies. There's tons more out there, like Texas Chainsaw, which I also saw last week for the first time, and I thought that was also great. I know that there's plenty of movies that come after that, but what would be your slasher genre recommendation for people that may want to take a peek into this genre and see what it's about?
I know Killa V got a longer answer, so I'll just say Happy Death Day is definitely something I recommend. Halloween 2018, and then the two after. Obviously, go back and watch the originals, but if you're just looking for something, because I know some people that don't like old films. They don't like vintage. They don't like, and I can understand that. I think it's cheesy because you should definitely enjoy all of cinema. But anyways, 2018 Halloween series, love that trilogy. And yeah, I think that would be it for me. What about you, Killa V?
I would say definitely the Halloween. But again, for the modern Scream, right? Scream it keeps you engaged. It's the teen, high school, so you can relate to that, So it depends on what you're looking for when it comes to, if you want to go back, right? Some kids like to go back and watch those 70s and 80s movies. And Halloween is definitely number one to me of all time.
Yeah, there's all types out there for you. Like we've said, Halloween, Scream, Happy Death Day if you want a newer age film, the Friday the 13th if you wish to take that adventure. I personally will never do it again. There's Nightmare on Elm Street. Some call the original Psycho a slasher. There's so many options out there for you. Just type in what kind of vibe you want on Google, and it'll appear there for you. Hear what we had to say about some of these. Maybe one caught your eye. But it's time to move in to the next sub-genre. The psychodramas, the psycho thrillers, anything that deals with psychology on a deeper level. Similar to some of these Jordan Peele movies, like Us, one of my favorite ones.
Garbage. Me and Wes, again, me and Wes just caught some of them. Wes was sitting there like, what are we watching? Right? It's a different, I get it. I'm gonna be nice. It wasn't for me.
That's fair.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely fair. The whole episode that we talking about right now is some of these hard things may not be made for you. And so I get it. It's top 5 for me though. I love the thrill that movie gives you because of the way it was acted with Lupita and everybody else in the movie, the shots that they used to signify the story that they were telling, which was fantastic. The soundtrack and the score of the movie was brilliant. Like my partner that I was with at the time, she was traumatized by one of the songs that I would remember messing around and playing the music at certain times. Like if I was leaving her house, I would connect my Bluetooth to something in her room and play the music. And I'd hear her scream as I was leaving. Like it was on that kind of fun level of like, oh, that was a thrill. I remember coming home from the city at like 11 o'clock or midnight from class, wondering if I was going to get got by the train people. So Us, I really enjoyed. I think Jordan Peele has a nice mind for these new age thriller, psycho, deep horror type movies. And I could see why some have hit for him more than others. Like I said, Us is my favorite. I liked Get Out. And Nope wasn't really a hit for me. So for me personally, he has shot 2 for 3, but I can recognize some of Nope's brilliance.
I think you're wild for thinking that Nope wasn't a shot. You're bugging. It had to take some time to breathe. It's like fine wine. You know what I mean? I enjoyed it because I felt that it talked about society at a time where society needed to be spoken to, if you know what I mean. You know, back end of 2020, everything that went on in 2020 pandemic-wise, we're all on our phones. At the tail end of that, as we're starting to emerge, that's when he drops this movie. And I just think it's a commentary that's so brilliant. And yet I definitely was still on the edge of my seat at certain parts. Not scared in the sense of like, oh, I'm shaking in my bones and I'm uneasy. But again, there's some gruesome things you consider when you watch these movies from Jordan Peele. He's very good at putting a thought in your brain and then twisting it in a way that feels like you're getting stabbed, if you know what I mean. So I like Jordan Peele, man.
I mean, I like him too, bro. We gonna do that Jordan Peele episode one day, no time soon. But we gonna get there, and I'm excited to dive deep into all 3 of his movies so far with you. But you know, as we keep moving on, there's a movie called The Invisible Man, which I don't know if either of you have seen. I've only seen the classic version. There is a modern day version that I can't give my opinions on. But have you seen either of them?
I saw the classic, but again, when I think of horror, I want to be scared. It's not just sit there and be like, "Oh, that's interesting." And again, I can't relate. I relate more to where something could happen, and Invisible Man is invisible. They ain't doing that for me.
I saw the more modern one and I freaking loved it. I don't like the actress. Just don't like looking at her, respectfully. But the concept of an invisible man and them playing on domestic abuse and the concept of domestic abuse, again, we're talking about where the scariness lands. This is literally happening to certain people. Her fear is very, very real, and they paint that really well. It makes it very grounded and real. And again, man, I think that's the more psychological you get. You can't get psychological to the point where it's supernatural without having some connection to like the human story. And that's what's cool about this subgenre.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. You know, when these things turn a little bit more supernatural and unrealistic, having something like a real problem that people deal with, tie things down to keep a finger or a hand on the realism, it does help it a lot. I think that's what makes me enjoy it more than the straight up supernatural stuff. One great movie is called It Follows. It's a concept of this weird entity that's hell-bent on following you to kill you. And so, you know, the only person that gets tagged with that being following them, in order to transmit that to someone else, you have to have sexual relation with them, right? And so that's how you pass it on, right? And it clearly sounds like a STD or something like that, you know, as its overall meaning. But the movie itself does horror in a great way because it's a slow burn. It's five friends chilling around a campfire, but the camera is so high up in the sky, you can see the entity walking towards them on the beach without them seeing it first. And so you get that anticipation of, oh, shoot, I hope someone notices. Or you get the fake outs where someone's walking towards the group and when they're walking down the street and they're all freaking out, but it turns out it's just somebody passing by while the real entity has been behind them the whole time. It's kind of cool. It's really dope. And, you know, it was one of my more favorite newer films of the genre. You should both check it out. But, you know, another thing that I know we've all seen that does fall into this category, surprisingly enough, are the modern day and even classic It films.
Those were good. Those were good movies due to the fact that, again, some of it you can relate to as being a child and seeing scary things. And the scary parts of his face changing at any moment, those type of things are right. They catch you at a moment, like, oh shoot. So those were really good movies to me.
Oh yeah. Bill Skarsgård, he put his all into those movies. You know, he really turned up. I personally enjoy the way that those movies play on your psychological fears. Like the way that they bring that out of people is really fun. Like, oh, Richie's scared of clowns. This person is scared of gore or mummies or things like that. And you know, I think that the first movie does horror in the traditional sense a lot better than the second one. The second one feels very overstuffed at times, and I know that Killa V feels the same way because we spoke about it when we left the theater after seeing them. But I think there's gold in the second one also that makes for an interesting watch. But the first movie is just so much higher to me. But I'm gonna let IV cook because I know that he has an attachment to these movies that really gets him going.
These are in my top 5 movies of all time.
Both?
Oh wow.
Yeah, I don't consider them separate. I very much consider them as one whole movie, just released at different times. I mean, the book itself is one whole book. You know, it's not 2 movies. You know, the same way some people would say that about Deathly Hallows, for example. You know, it's like some people see it as an individual film or some people just see both parts as one story. And I think that's how I felt about this because you don't get some, you know, this is the case when the second movie makes the first movie look better. I think that dynamic is unique, right? When you have a chapter 2 that makes chapter 1 even more saucy, all of the growth from the characters that you see set off in the first movie, they then grow into these characters that their fears have also grown with them. And now they're playing with mature fears that have been undealt with, like you had a dad that would beat you and that would be abusive to you, and you chose into that same thing because it's all you know. They start depicting these depths in the characters that creeps me out, and then you get all of the great stuff from the horror. Pennywise is one of the scariest things I've ever seen on a screen in my life. I don't know about y'all. I just feel like he's actually high-key scary, bro. For real.
And he's a clown, which, you know, for those who have fear of clowns like me, it definitely adds to that, you know, that clowns are evil. Even the original was scary. So I think just the character connecting it to small town America, clown, right? Those things are, shit can happen. And we knew one of our most famous serial killers just as a clown.
There's also a mystery element, like we said in the other section. We don't know how they're going to solve this issue, where it came from. They're figuring out the story. We're invested in that part too. And then, again, I told you guys, I don't care to be scared just for the sake of being scared. I need something that's with that, some substance. You know what I mean? I need that. Every way that Pennywise is scaring a kid in this, it is tied to the character's actual fears. And I think that's also cool. You know, you create these lanes of creativity with the way that the alien scares them. Alien clown. Fire, bro.
Well, you know what? Before we move away from Pennywise, I gotta know. If Pennywise were real, what fear would he use against you? Now, for me, I'm screwed because One of my highest ones after having a terrible experience with them in 2016 is spiders. I do not like spiders, and Pennywise, besides the deadlights, my man, one of his main forms is a spider. I am donezo. He would have me clipped. I don't know what I would do if a room full of spiders appeared in front of me and they all started attacking me. I'd probably die, like truly.
All right, so I'll keep it basic. The fear of, I guess, rats. I have a fear with rats. When I see them, I run the other. I run the other way like they're killers. I go around the block if I have to, or I'll change my parking spot if I see one. Something about them.
Nah, so he's gonna pop up as a crowd of rats for you, a bunch of spiders for Willie. For me, I think it's not as much about like what he shows up as much as like he if he were to pop out as someone I could trust, and then like switch up, like me, I'm too trusting of him and it opens me up to get like killed or scared by him. I think that would definitely be the way he'd pull up on me, you know, because that's the stuff that really scares me the most when I watch these movies too. It's like there's an element of he knows you, bro. He knows like what makes you tweak. So he plays into it so perfectly, which means I'm kind of like not trusting myself. I'm like, dang, if these characters were some steel-toed, never had like any weaknesses at all. And then by the end of the movie, that's what happens for the kids, right? The kids learn how to overcome the fear. They realize, oh, I'm all good. I'm not actually afraid of you because I don't have to have any fear. That storyline is cool. I feel like that would be how he'd attack me for sure. It'd be a thing of, can I trust him? Oh, no, I can't trust him. He's killing me right now. And then I'm dead.
Well, we kind of rolling through some of these psychological horrors. We've given some examples, the It franchise. We got It Follows. If you want to take it back to some of the less crazier, like supernatural / psychological, because these are psychological with a mix of supernatural. There's Silence of the Lambs. There's Psycho, and then some of the newer stuff, them Jordan Peele movies, The Babadook, or a total classic, The Shining, which I can't even really explain that movie. I feel like that's a movie you just kind of gotta watch for yourself, and if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. But let's move a little bit forward to the straight up paranormal, supernatural-esque movies, which still do dabble in the psychological realm. But these kind of films, they take a bit of a more straight supernatural-esque type turn. What have you guys consumed from this genre, whether it be some of these new A24 films, some of these older Exorcist type movies?
Only The Ring, bro. Actually, yeah, I've seen Annabelle. Actually. No, I'm wilding.
Yeah, anything with supernatural type stuff, I've never been interested in. Me and Alex, when we first started dating, we used to watch things like that, paranormal and all those type of, but it just, it's like, oh shit. But it wasn't something that it was like a genre that I was like, oh, I got to see the next one. So that topic right there it would have to be something classic or not much I could see on that topic.
I mean, yeah, I feel like in terms of like when I say paranormal and supernatural, what comes to mind for a lot of people might be the Conjuring movies or the Annabelle movies, like Isaiah said. And I've seen some of them. I've seen 2 or 3 Conjurings. I thought there were only 2. There might be a third. If there is, I've seen it. The problem is it's always the same cast. It gets kind of blurry, but I've seen a good amount. And what I've recognized is I've never really set out to watch those movies alone. Not because I'm scared, because my interest in it is low. But they make for fun group watches where there's other people in the room also and all the lights are off and everybody starts to scream at the same time, but I'm screaming because you're screaming, not because the movie is screaming type vibe. We did a few of those a few years ago, like 2018 December, me and a couple of people I knew. And it's those kind of experiences where I think these supernatural type movies kind of shine. Maybe some of the more modern ones, but a really fun supernatural movie that I watched recently was Talk to Me. In fact, I watched it twice in one day because I watched with a group. really enjoyed it and said, how am I going to like this solo? And I like this solo also. And that's a really new one, which was really valid, original idea, and created by a YouTube group that got, the Hollywood money from a studio to say, yo, you can go make this. And I thought it was a refreshing experience. I've been enjoying in my movie watching journey over the last year the 7 and 8 out of 10 movies more than the 10 out of 10 movies trying to be peak cinema. I enjoy the movies that let me have a fun time. But when it comes to this kind of genre of supernatural stuff, I think that's something that also stops a lot of people or has a lot of people question certain things is religion, because that plays a role in how people perceive some of these movies also.
I think it's funny you say that because I think the religion aspect does play a role because of the way that was preached to you. Like, don't watch that, because that could bring the spirit into you, And I think that always stood with me where it's like, I could watch horror stuff, but nothing that's spiritual or, that type of crossing the other side type thing. Is something that I've always said, I can't do. Like, my spirit tells me, don't bring that into the house, which is weird. It's weird.
Yeah, and I think I also want to talk about. I'm not that big into it, but I feel like directors like Ari Aster, who make these subgenres underneath, or kind of like the bridge between something. What's the word that we use? Oh, psychological. It's almost like a psychological slash supernatural film, like Midsommar, where you're not seeing any level of darkness throughout that whole movie. It's all bright light. And it's creepy, man. People getting killed, killing themselves, doing some crazy stuff. Hereditary, also a very creepy tale about, a curse that's on a family, basically. And so you watch that play out. And I just think A24, which is the production studio that's backed these movies with Ari Aster, that made that movie, talk to me, they're very, very much at the top of the game right now. I mean, movie of the year last year. So when you're watching these films, you're like, man, that people who are making this with a level of intention. And I think, again, that's where I'll watch them. I'll watch them and I'll try to enjoy them, and they'll scare the crap out of me. But they're creepy and they make me feel all weird. But at least it's not just scaring me for scaring's sake. Like, I don't want to watch a demon just walk out of a TV for nothing. I don't want to see a spirit just live in a house just because. Like, I want some reason behind it.
Well, I mean, we can't stay on supernatural too long because not all of us are really well versed in that idea. But just know there's the entire Conjuring universe out there. We got Paranormal Activity movies. There's The Exorcist. There are movies for you out there if you want that extra outside of realistic horror type vibes. They're there for you. And, they sneaked away. The supernatural always finds a way into the other genre we've spoken about. The Friday movies get it sometimes. Halloween gets it sometimes. But these are the big ghost and crazy demons and stuff like that, which may not be for everybody. Maybe exactly what you're looking for. Maybe it's what most people see horror as nowadays. I don't know. But to keep pushing forward, something that happens a lot in horror is things get repeated over and over again and dug into the grave. Some argue that it happened with slashers. Well, this specific subgenre of horror feels like it came and now it kind of just disappeared. I feel like I haven't seen one in a while. Found footage horror, which I believe began with the Blair Witch Project, but I'm not entirely sure.
Killa V, have you seen Cloverfield?
I believe I did, yeah. So I like those type of movies because when it's the angle of where it feels like it's real, right? It possibly could be happening. There's possibly something out there that, a mystery that hasn't been solved. I like those type of movies, right? So yeah, even though like the Blair Witch and that were like at the end, there was a witch and it was kind of a supernatural type thing, the lead up to it, right, kept you engaged in the woods, right? You find those houses, they're like, why is this house abandoned, right? And we've experienced, I don't know if you remember, Willie, actually, I think Isaiah was there. One of the houses we went to in the Catskills, me and Whitney, I don't know if you guys, but I saw a little boy running around the house that wasn't with us. That was our third time there for me and my family. So when I went up there with the killers, we saw a little boy running around the house, right? And then next door was a burnt out house, right? What happened there? Why is that even still standing? So, right, you had all these feelings. So you can connect those movies, right? And then it puts more fear when you stay there because you're like, oh, shoot, I remember that movie. And look, we're next to that house. And why I see that little boy running around?
That's so wild. I would be tripped out. I couldn't stick around the Poconos. They about to take it to poke at your nose. You about to be dead. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up because I know as a fact that that's the exact same trip where you, me, IV, and IV's pops were playing dominoes outside, and it might have been like midnight or 1 a.m. We were just playing outside, and the way the light was set up, we could only see our table and like maybe a foot out in every direction of our table. And then it was just pitch black woods. And we started hearing pitter-pattering, pitter-patter, pitter-patter, pitter-patter at like 1 o'clock in the morning. And so we were like, are we hearing things? Nah, we can't be. And then we'd hear tick, tick, tap, tap, patter, 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 patter. And so it happened a few times. And then we started hearing like almost like rocks going like tick, 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 tick. Tick, 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 tick. And so we would start freaking out, right? Because now we're like, okay, nah, this is getting too spooky. People was seeing little dudes run around the house and everything. So IV's pops gets up and he goes, all right, yo, whoever's out there, you need to relax. Out comes Whitney, our aunt, and IV's sister Isa from our love episode, dying laughing at us because they was really out in the dark trolling. But the fact is, we were a little bit scared in that moment. It was kind of like a fun scare, but at the same time, like very serious. And I definitely felt that going to sleep in that house that night. But when it comes to like the found footage horror, that is an immersive experience because you are literally the camera lens. You are seeing it through the eyes of what they are seeing. That's why shows like Ghost Hunters and stuff like that, I feel like are so successful because they put that immersiveness in there. So all of those found footage horrors, if you type that in on Google and you can just see it and, you know, a whole list of them, those are like a cool little subgenre of horror. Now, the subgenre of horror that we're going into next is one that out of all of these might be the one that I really go to the least. I probably need to like expand my thought process or like my watching experience of these, but it's like this torture body horror type subgenre of horror. Some of it is a little bit too freaky, like the human centipede and shit like that. I'm just not about that at all. But then you got like the gory-esque Saw movies, which I've seen 1 or 2 and I thought those were good, but just not necessarily my cup of tea either. Like, I don't like shit that has to do with eyeballs and stuff, and they be doing that sometimes.
Again, I speak for myself. If I can't relate to it, I'll watch it, but it's not. I wouldn't watch part 2 and watch the whole series, right? It's like I see what you're going at with the first one. It's not my cup of tea. I'm not watching 2 through 6, right? So I relate more to things that I'm like, that put fear in me. Walking in the woods alone, walking, through Nyack alone at night when there's nobody around. That's more scary than me walking in the hood, right? Where there's noise and you could get shot or stabbed. I'd rather be there. So it's just a weird thing, but those type of movies I'll watch. Like I saw Soul 1 and 2, and that was it for me. I didn't have to watch the rest of them.
Word, I think I'm in the same place. I mean, I've seen a couple things just to try it, especially with new stuff coming out, right? Like you have newer movies like Bodies with Pete Davidson. Those are kind of like entering into that area. Again, that was an A24 film. I think that's why I tried it. Actually, A24 is actually, shout outs to them on this episode because talk about getting into horror. I would say I wouldn't have gotten into horror as hard as I have without A24 introducing it in some way. So shout outs to them. But yeah, definitely that movie. But I mean, when I think of body, I think the only movie I really could see and say like, oh, you know, classic. Like Jennifer's Body, bro. Like Jennifer's Body. That's a classic body, bro. That's a body horror.
Yeah, you know, it's just, to me, it's not really a genre that screams out at me. But I need to go and finish the rest of the Saw movies just to see how those go. But yeah, I don't get that fear aspect from these movies. I just, honestly, I be getting disgusted. And that's not what I really care for when I'm watching some of these movies. But Saw wise, I might have to stick it through just to see where it goes. But I mean, those are only some of the subgenres we've got. There's plenty more out there. It gets a little hard to pinpoint where you're going to put each one. Oh, is Halloween a slasher, or is it a thriller, or is it this? But then there's some psychological aspects. But then Talk to Me is doing this, but then it's doing that. It gets ridiculous. It gets kind of hard. But you know, Killa V, I just want to ask you, because I know that it's been quite a conversation, and I know that there are still a few movies we haven't necessarily tackled yet. What are some of your favorite just horror movies, maybe top 3 that you would recommend to people?
So we got Halloween, classic, original, The Strangers. You gotta see this. It's gonna make you get a gun. And then they made 2 versions. I like both of these movies. One was 1979, one was in the 80s. When a Stranger Calls. Gotta watch When the Stranger Calls. That is, again, these are movies that I could relate to. And again, since I'm big into true crime, a lot of these movies connect to real cases that have happened, right? So it becomes even real to the point of that. And I like that fear. I like to be like, oh, let's go to the camping. And I like to feel scared, right? I like to do that. It's just that's my drug, if that's the right way of saying it.
You know, I love that you brought up The Strangers, because last week during New York Comic Con, they announced and kind of showcased the trailer for this Strangers reboot, where next year they're going to drop 3 movies that take place in the Strangers universe. And that first trailer showcased that fear of someone's knocking at your door. Ding dong, who is it? Oh my God. And it was just so reminiscent of the first movie. So if you haven't checked that out, you got to, because they trying to bring these horror movies back. They got The Strangers dropping. They have this like Pearl X trilogy of movies where 2 of them dropped, I think, last year, and then 1 drops next year. And it's just, they're going hard in that aspect. Also, they're trying to revive this horror genre in different ways. All of the elevatedness over at A24, which brings us into that other conversation that we had last week, IV, of Miramax versus A24 for the Halloween franchise. And I was like, I don't know how I feel. I have sat on my thoughts on that, and I'm glad that Miramax won, because A24 has done so much of this elevated horror with Talk to Me and Hereditary, Midsummer, all of that elevatedness. I don't think I want for a Halloween franchise. I watched Rob Zombie's movies. They were garbage. And what I found to be garbage about the first one in the traditional Halloween sense was explaining Michael Myers, why he does what he does, how the world around him is evil also, and he's a representation of that evil. I didn't care for that, because I like when Michael is just a demon. Like, he is just, I'm going to stab you because I'm going to stab you. No cuz. That's it. You getting stabbed. So those are kind of where I've leveled out on those feelings of, okay, I'm kind of happy Miramax may have gotten it. It would have been interesting, maybe, but Miramax, I'm hoping, just develops a new slasher in an interesting way that doesn't do too much elevatedness for a character I don't really need it for.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. I mean, they've been around for so long. I mean, A24 is basically like the young rebel taking out something that is a major part of why the pillar of horror exists to this day. You know what I mean? So it makes sense, but I do enjoy the contrast. There's definitely a vintage, traditional vibe, and then there's different types of movies. Like, again, I think Jordan Peele is also one of those people who does, though he isn't produced by A24, he does an elevated horror. He does a horror that's like an what's the word? An acquired taste, like not everybody wants to eat like caviar. It might just be too fancy for them. They just stick to some chicken. They chilling. You know what I mean? And I think that's how movies also are kind of diversified in this genre too.
Yeah, I mean, I think if anything has been made clear so far from this entire episode is that there's something out there that's for you, but you got to be willing to find it. Now, I want to venture very quickly into the concept of just horror in video games because we at CUZZO-OP, we got to talk gaming. Killa V, I don't know how much you'll have to add to this conversation. You got any horror games under your belt?
No, you're the only one that you've introduced me to. Whenever a horror game comes out, you're the one who shows me and play. You play it in front of me, so I'm able to enjoy it. But even those games, it's like once you figure it out, then that's it, right? There's nothing exciting about it to me.
Got you. What about you, Ivy?
I would say obviously Resident Evils, right? These are staple horror video games. Zombie games, get scared, get spooked, somebody tries to grab you from this direction, you're trying to stay alive against a horde of enemies, and it's diversified itself into different types of genres on some Final Fantasy type, but I definitely think those are classics, right? But then there's also psychological concepts here. Remedy Games is well known for their original game on the 360 called Alan Wake. And Alan Wake was a classic, man. Such a good game. And then when Xbox One dropped, they did another game, Quantum Break, playing with time. And they ended up with a game called Control, which won on a many list Game of the Year when it came out. Very weird game, creepy game. You're in this like bureau and you don't know why you're there, but you're drawn to this building and there's something tying you to this building and you have to go on this journey and you get this weird gun that talks to you. And it's like the weirdest story ever. But as you keep getting immersed and you're like kind of confused, it almost is the point of immersion. You get kind of creeped out as you're in the world. Very tweaked out stuff. And now they're taking all of that stuff and then right here this week, we have Alan Wake 2 dropped. So it's like, I think at the end of the day, games that play with you mentally are part of what is most immersive, in my opinion. I think that zombie games have kind of been spoiled. I kind of think like there's a spoiling of seeing the same stuff. So I like seeing innovation in gaming when it comes to horror. And I like that, Remedy Games is a perfect example. They took their thriller strategy and they said, okay, hold on, let's shift into more horror. That's a space that we could be in. And I'm trying my best to talk about this because I know you're going to talk about a game that I think is probably one of, if not the most well-known horror game or scary game on the systems. I know you're about to talk that Until Dawn.
I mean, funny enough, I would put a couple of other games ahead of the Until Dawn in terms of like most widely known. Outlast is a fantastic game that I think I've only managed to do like maybe the first game. The second game was terrible, but the first game was like a really, really good game of horror. You're in the found footage-esque type thing. That game was scary. I'm gonna be real. Like, that was a terrifying experience for me, but it was immersive. Slenderman is a classic, immersive. PT, that playable teaser with the game that never dropped, was one of the greatest things of all time in the realm of gaming horror. But yeah, I'm talking Until Dawn. That's my favorite horror game. It might be in my top 10 favorite games of all time, maybe, because there's a lot of good games out there. But I would always recommend anybody who has a PlayStation 4 or 5, get Until Dawn. There's a chance that if you have a PS5 and you bought it early on in its life, 2020, 2021, that you'll have Until Dawn. There's a chance you own the game right now. Download that joint. Play it. Until Dawn is like a fun ass everything horror trope video game. And it's fantastic. It's a decision-based horror game where you are tasked with keeping 8 characters alive from night until dawn. Glorious. I recommend that to everybody. Try to go in as blind as possible, please. It really is the best experience. And it got some big name actors like my boy Rami Malek, the Oscar winner, one of my favorites, and Hayden Panettiere, who, Scream 4, classic. But yeah, Until Dawn, bro. That's one of them. That's one of my big ones. And then there's these multiplayer games You know, the old Friday the 13th game, which is the best thing in the Friday the 13th universe. Unfortunately, they can't really update the game anymore after some law stuff, but that was fun. Dead by Daylight is a fun title to play with friends. You're all running around trying to fix generators and escape from a little area with a killer, and they do little collabs. They got Michael Myers in the game. They got Leatherface. They got Ghostface. It's kind of a vibe during this holiday season, you know? And then, you know, this new Texas Chainsaw game supposedly ain't that great, but whatever, you know? And then there's also like the co-op story games, the Dark Pictures anthologies. I don't know if the Dark Picture anthology is great. Until Dawn is better. But there's that too. The Quarry, the spiritual successor to Until Dawn. Basically, anything Supermassive Games, you should probably just check them out. They've got some good ranging horror titles for you. Some 10 hours, some 3 hours. But those are some of those horror, like, oh yeah, that in my mind. But to close out the episode, I've got a question for you both. When it comes to horror, how do you recommend people get into horror? What do you have to say to someone who may be wanting to give this expansive genre a try?
Well, if you're old enough, I would say you crack open a pumpkin beer, you put on the heat, sweat a little, you turn on a movie and you cuddle up with whoever you love. Could be your kids, because I did it with my son last year. Turn all the lights off and just make sure you lock the doors and make sure those windows are locked. And just, you know, try. I would say you should start off with something like The Strangers. I think that's a good basic movie to be a little scared. It's a little bit of a mystery, and there's a plot. Like IV said, he likes those movies that it's not just killings, but there's something behind it. So I would recommend you do all these type of things, and, you know, just it's good to be scared a little. Just make sure, again, like I said, lock your doors, lock your windows, check your kids. Have fun with it, man. Just look at it as fun and enjoy it. Just enjoy that moment.
I think for me, man, if you're the type that likes elevated film with like a lot of deep writing and all that good stuff, I think you could start with some of Ari Aster's stuff. I think you can go, you know, kind of the psychological, supernatural or psychological world, something in that realm. Maybe Jordan Peele. Start there, dip your toe in, see it from an abstract way first before you then go into what might be traditional. And if you're somebody who just likes to see people die, bro, and just get scared and stuff, I would say 2018 Halloween is a good place to start. I think that, you know, it's a modern take on a classic story. You'll find something you're interested in, and then you'll get in that. You'll get in that slasher vibe. It's a good way to start. And then from there, bro, the can of worms has been open, baby.
The great thing is that there's something out there for everyone. So whatever your cup of tea is, you know, suck it up and enjoy it, and, you know, be happy. So I'm happy with watching what I like, and you're happy with what you like to watch. So there's something out there for everyone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, I'm going to recommend for classic Halloween 1978. You can't go wrong. Go in, just know it's a classic. There are more modern versions of that film that do things that you may like, so that 2018 version may not be a bad idea. If you want the middle of the modern, you could go Scream. It's a more lighthearted yet still serious kind of horror slasher-esque movie. And then we take it into the more modern day with the It Follows and Talk to Me's. Those are pretty great, in my opinion. Also, gaming, like I said, get on that Until Dawn. But I think that in terms of getting into horror, we've given you a great selection of movies to pick from. You can go into our description and watch trailers for almost all of the movies we spoke about here today, just to see if any of them will get you interested. But if you're on YouTube, there are also some good horror short videos on YouTube. There's a horror short that's about 2 minutes long called Lights Out that I would highly recommend. And there was a movie that they made in 2016. I don't think it's as good as the short, but why not? There's also another short, 15 minutes long. I know that's not crazy short, but it's shorter than a full-length movie called The Other Side of the Box. You know, it's nothing too crazy, but it's a nice way to dabble. Either way, we gave some good recommendations. Hopefully you give a horror a try. October 31st is right around the corner. Maybe it's time to sit down and watch a movie, but Killa V, Pops, Thank you for joining us, and I am excited for the next time you are able to come on to CUZZO-OP. This has been a really fun time.
Thank you for having me. This was great. And if you're too scared to watch it alone, give me a call. I'm always available. Killa!
We thank you so much for joining us for another episode of CUZZO-OP. Make sure you keep tapping in everywhere that you listen to podcasts. You can find us as well as YouTube. Send the link out. Show them we got a couple cool dudes that are talking about movies, TV, and video games. You know, because every time you tap into CUZZO-OP, you're always going to find two cousins, one podcast, and endless entertainment. Thanks.
Killa!